Look great, Tom.
Oh, thanks. Oh, I got a fan here, so I'll be fine in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, as soon as she shuts it off. Okay, everybody's phones are off? Cool. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to start out by saying the last time I did this in front of a group was right at 8.5 years ago, before I moved out here, and it was in front of about 250 people. And a lot has changed for me in 8.5 years, or 8 years, but this experience happened 21.5 years ago, and it feels like yesterday. I got to thinking about something today. I thought, if every one of you thought, 21.5 years ago, do I remember something really profound that happened to me? I don't know if a lot of us would remember stuff that far back. This hit me so intensely, and unfortunately it was in a time where I had to make a decision with our family to take my mother off life support. But with that, 21.5 years ago, as soon as it happened, I had friends say to me right away, you better write this down because you're never going to remember all this. I go, remember it? It is so deep in my heart and soul, it will be with me till the day I leave the physical world. So with that, I want to give you a little bit of a background. And I want everyone to know this is not about me. This experience happened through me, and this is definitely God's message. This is not Tom's message. This is God's message. And it is so profound, it took me years to actually put all the pieces together. But I want to start by saying something that happened in 1976. I was going to be becoming 12 years old. I was 11 at the time. It was Christmas time, and my mother woke up with a really bad headache. And she hardly ever woke up with headaches. By that evening, she was trying to get Christmas stuff ready. It was the day before Christmas. We actually had to take her into the hospital because her headache was so bad. It was 1 or 2 days later, she fell into a coma. She got encephalitis and TB meningitis combined. She fell into a coma for 7 months. Almost didn't come out of it. And there was one point at about 6.5 months in, I remember being in the hospital in Grand Forks, North Dakota. My dad and I were with her. It was about 7 o'clock at night. And I remember the doctor came in. I was sitting in her room, just at a little table, just kind of off from where her bed was. She had been not awake for 6.5 months, and the doctor came in, saw me, but I was a very tall 11-year-old child. I was probably way too big, but I was very tall. So he didn't ask me to leave the room. My dad didn't either, which that's okay, because this was supposed to happen to me. The doctor started talking to my dad and saying, my dad's father, our name was Bud, and he was like, Bud, we've done everything we can for Colette. She is probably going to pass away in the middle of the night. And as an 11-year-old child, I went, what? My mother is going to pass away in the middle of the night? They kept talking, and I remember just getting up, and I thought, okay, wait. I can't believe what I just heard. I left her room, and I just started walking the hospital, just trying to figure out what I just heard, and like, my mother's leaving me in the middle of the night. How am I going to deal? And I just, walking through the hospital, I wandered up to this little room, and it was the chapel that was in the hospital. I walked in there, and I remember sitting down in a pew in the front. It's a very small room, probably the size of a horse stall, 12 by 12. It was very small. And I just started praying. And at 11 years old, I believed in God. I knew there was something greater than us. And I remember just staying in prayer. I thought I was in prayer for, hour and a half, 2 hours. I apparently fell asleep praying to God. And when I woke up, I walked back into my mother's room. And my father looked at me and said, are you okay? And I go, yeah. He goes, and I asked him, I said, is Mom still here? And he's like, it's miraculous, she's made it through the night. I go, made it through the night? What time is it? And he goes, 7 in the morning. I go, wait, I left 7 o'clock last night. He goes, yes, you've been gone 12 hours. I wasn't worried about you because you're a very strong kid. I knew you were going to be okay. I needed to stay right next to her bed, praying to God that please don't take your mother. And I went, so she's still with us? And he's like, yes. I cannot explain to you how I felt that moment, because as an 11-year-old, to hear that, and then to fall asleep, wake up 12 hours later, go in, she's still alive, I just felt, wow, okay. I felt this weight lift off of me. So, 2 weeks later, she finally wakes up. Now she's 7 months in the hospital. And we go to talk to the doctors about what are we going to do for her rehab, because now she woke up totally paralyzed. I got to have a disclaimer. I may break down and I may cry because when I go this far back, there's a lot of emotion, and right now it's emotion of gratitude. I am so grateful for what God has gifted me with my life, for all these lessons, because I feel so at peace. I've never been this peaceful in my whole life. Anyway, so going back to that. She woke up a couple weeks later, and we're talking about what to do. What do we do with her? The doctor said, we're going to put her in an old folks home. We were like, no. My dad said, she will die there. We're going to take her back to the farm in North Dakota. And the doctor said, wait, you can't take her back to the farm. You guys aren't physical therapists. You don't know what to do with her. And my dad said, listen, she has to come home to the farm. Tell us how to do the rehab. Well, I'm this tall as 11 years old. So I became my mother's physical therapist when I was 11. And I would get off the school bus. I went to a country school. There was 5 kids in my class. And so I remember getting off the bus, running in the house. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about my schoolwork. All I cared about was helping my mother get better. And I would run into where she was, and I'd take her in her wheelchair, and I'd wheel her over to this wall we had between our living room and kitchen. And I'd say, okay, Mom, we've got to start physical therapy. She's like, Tommy, please don't. She called me Tommy. She said, please don't drop me. I said, oh, Mom, I won't. She was a small woman, 5'4". So we do hours and hours of therapy. Got her better. And about 6 months after all her rehab, maybe a little bit longer, don't know exactly the time frame, all of a sudden, I came in one day and my dad looked so depressed, and he was sitting in the living room in his chair. And let me back up a second. When I got off the school bus one day, about 9 months, maybe to a year later, we had a big feedlot where we had about 150 head of cattle. And there were semis backed up to our feedlots. And I'm like, this is odd. We don't sell our calves till spring. What are they doing down there? So I ran in the house, saw my dad in his favorite black recliner. I said, Dad, what is going down at the feedlot? I don't understand. We don't sell our calves till spring. And he said, he just wouldn't answer me. And I thought, I got to go see what's going on. So I went running out to the feedlots. And I remember going through the gate at exactly the same time I had the one cow my dad gave me was walking up the ramp into the semi. And I burst into tears because I didn't know why. I didn't go back to the house. Then all the semis left with all of our cattle. Why? Because after 7 months in the hospital with insurance, we were $150,000 in debt. And the bank repossessed my dad's livelihood. And he worked his whole life to be doing that. So he became very depressed. So when I ran in that day and I wanted to talk to him, he just looked so defeated. And I thought, what is happening? A couple days later, he ends up in the hospital. And I'm like, Dad. So I'd go to see him in the hospital, and I'd be like, Dad, I don't understand. What is going on with you? Now I'm 12, going to be on 13. And I said, I don't understand. Why are you here? Why are you in the hospital? He wouldn't answer me. So he's in the hospital for probably 5-6 weeks. I go see him again right before his birthday. And he says this to me. When I said, Dad, I don't understand. What are you ill from? Do you have a disease? He's like, no. He's like, let me share something with you. And I said, what are you about ready to share with me? He said, do you remember that day or that night in Grand Forks when the doctor came in and told you your mother was probably not going to make it through the night? I said, yeah, that's like right here. He said, well, when you were gone for 12 hours praying in the chapel, he said, I stayed kneeling right alongside your mother's bed, praying all night long. He said, all I prayed to God was, please, please, spare Colette, their mother. I don't know how to raise these last 4 children at home. You can have my life in return. So he said, Tommy, I've given my life up so your mother could be here. And I went, what? I don't understand what you just told me. He said, I prayed for 12 hours, please, please spare their mother, take my life in return. Now, this is 1978, so I don't know. So I'm just thinking, my dad just told me that he gave up his life for my mother to be okay. So I'm trying to process this out. Well, 2 days later, my dad dies. So, what do you think happened to me? I got very angry at who first? God. Because what he told me. He didn't mean anything negative by it. Not at all. He did. My father he was just saying it to, I don't know, but those words just went, ugh. And when he passed away, I was like, why did God take my dad? Why did he need him? I don't understand. So I came from, I believe in God, I prayed a lot as a kid, whatever, to, no, now I'm so angry as a 13-year-old that I completely turned away from him. So I'm struggling a lot through my life as a kid, trying to figure out things, whatever. And so a lot of unusual things would happen to me spiritually, I want to call them. Spiritual experiences, different things. And I believe, to this day, I was tested to see if I was ever going to, I want to call it shut down, or not believe in things that are, if you can't see it or you can't, are just very unusual things, which that's going to come in the second book, really detailed stuff. But one of the things, here's what's happened to me my whole life. I'm going to share one experience because it was so just kind of amazing. My mother's sister was one of her best friends, and she was very ill with cancer. And so one day, and she had been fighting cancer a long time. I'm going to the barn one day to train horse like I normally do, and I pull up to the barn. It was in Chino Hills, California. Get out of my Lexus at the time, walk up to the barn, and went, I forgot my cell phone. So I went back to my car, and as I got in my car, these are the kind of things that, they're unexplainable, but I remember opening my car door. I got in, I sat down on my driver's seat, my left foot was out, and something said, look into your arena. And I looked into the arena, and what I saw, and all I can explain what it looks like a movie screen just comes in front of me. And right in front of me, I saw my Aunt Rosella, and I saw her do this in my arena and do this. And I'm like, then I saw, from the end of my arena, her 9-year-old son, who drowned, running toward her, and her granddaughter, who was 5 and who died of leukemia, running toward her. And I'm like, so I'm watching this. She greets them, she grabs one on each side, and she stands up, and she walks away, and then they fade into a distance. I'm like, wow, my Aunt Rosella must have just crossed over today. Interesting. So I pondered for about 2 hours, and I'm like trying to ride horses. I'm like, okay, I gotta call my cousin and just see if his mother passed away, because I know she did. I just saw her in the space we all want to believe is heaven or eternal life, whatever you want. So anyway, I get the courage. I had to get the courage up because even though he's my cousin, if he just lost his mother, how was I going to try to explain something without, well, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, it was very touchy. So I thought, no, Tom, you just have to. So I call him up. And I go, Kevin, I have a question for you. And he's like, yeah. I go, did Rosella pass away today? And he's like, yes, she did. And I said, oh. And what? I said, let me tell you what happened just now. And I thought, ooh. And I get nervous back then to tell people, because I thought, ooh, what are they going to think, whatever. And I thought, I really don't care. So I said, Kevin, at about this time, it was about 9:15 California time, so North Dakota time would have been like 11:15 or whatever. I said, Kevin, I said, I told him the story about going back to my car, and he's like, oh, interesting. And I said, what? And he goes, well, at around 11:15, I was with my sister standing alongside of her hospital bed, and he said, out of the blue, her left leg came up off the bed, and the sheet slipped off of it. And he said, her other leg was flat on the bed, but the other one was up. And I went, oh, okay. He said, and I kind of put the blanket back over, and I tried to push her leg back down. But he said, there was no flattening it out. And I went, no, because she was kneeling on the ground. That's what I'm thinking in my head I can say to him. And so he said, and then all of a sudden, he said, the leg just went down with no effort at all. And I said to myself, that's when she stood up and walked off. When he told me the exactly same time that I saw it, I went, ooh, see, these things keep happening to me, and I don't know why, but this is just something that has gone on my whole life. So I believe, again, I was being tested because every time something like that would happen, I would never shut down. I would never not believe it. I would not think I was crazy, because I'm sure a lot of people, well, I got stories about my poor dad back then because they thought he was, because I'm sure he had some of these, I don't want to call them gifts, but these experiences. So with that, I don't know how many years later it was, I was again going to work to train horses, March 18th, 2004. I'll never forget that day. My sister Donna called. The phone rang. I was halfway to work, and she says, Tom, Mother had a major, major stroke. You need to get to Minnesota as soon as you can. I'm like, what? And she's like, she had a major stroke. And I'm like, oh boy. The memory that came in so strong when she told me that was of a conversation. My mother was one of my best friends. I loved my mother with all my heart. She called all of us. I have 6 sisters and a brother. I'm the youngest of 8. She called every one of us on the same day about a year earlier. And she called, she said, Tom, you're the last one I'm talking to today. And I said, so Mom, what's up? She's like, well, I want to talk to you about 2 things. And I said, okay. She says, now, the first thing is, she goes, if you ever have all the proof in the world, and if I'm on life support, and I will never walk again, talk again, get up, go to the bathroom myself, she goes, please, please, if you have all the proof from the doctor, do not leave me hooked up. I said, Mother, I would never do that to you. I would never. But I'm going to need all the proof in the world. Because I said, in 76, you were in a coma for 7 months, and you were paralyzed when you woke up. But I said, I know how long it took you then. I said, so yes, you have my word if this ever happens to you. You have my word. I said, you will never have to ask me that again. And I said, what is the second thing you're about ready to tell me? Because I'm really intrigued. This was really hard to hear, but I understood why she was there. She said, I've actually, the last year, I've been praying to die before I turn 80. And I went, what? She goes, I've been praying to die before I turn 80. She said, Tom, I'm tired. I go, Mom, I get it. I understand. I will never judge you. I was there with you with your first illness, to where I said 7 months in a coma, not using your muscles. I knew how much hard work it was for you to get back to normal. 26 years later, I understand, and she was very arthritic. She was an amazing woman. But when I heard that, I went, oh, wow, okay. And I said, again, Mother, no judgment. My mother was very, very faithful, went to Catholic church, was very, very spiritual. And it's weird because growing up, I never ever, and everyone's parents are wonderful, don't get me wrong, I never heard my mother say anything negative about a person, and I thought, that just seems so odd, because we all kind of once in a while say things about, my mother never talked bad about anybody, and I thought, I wonder why. Anyway. So when she said that, I went, oh wow. So, flip back to March 23rd, I went, oh boy, we're 5 weeks before she turns 80. And I'm like, okay, I hope this isn't the time, but I did say to her too, I said, Mom, one last thing I want to just say to you, ask and you shall receive, right? She's like, I know. I said, so you're praying, you know what's probably going to happen. And she's like, yes, but Tommy, I'm ready to go home. When she said home, I just about broke down, because this is not home. Well, I love home and I love this. This is home is eternal life. To me, this is just our testing grounds. We're being tested daily here. So I just said, Mom, you know what? We never need to talk about this again. So here we are, 5 weeks later. My sister, almost a year later, my sister calls me and says, Mother's had a major stroke. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're 5 weeks from her 80th birthday. I got to get to her as soon as I can. I went home, packed, got to Minneapolis. We were all trying to get to the same time. We all pretty much got to the same time. And I just remember running into her room, and there she was, hooked up to all this life support. And I'm like, oh, she's okay. Now, she was very coherent. She could look at us. You could tell when she looked at us, She knew each one of us. She just couldn't say, hi Tom, hi Shar, hi Donna, hi Gary. She couldn't talk to us because there was nothing there. And I'm like, oh Lord. So here she is. She's staring at us and everything. And so I'm like, okay, so doctor comes in, first day, do a CAT scan. He's like, if the bleeding doesn't stop, we're going to have to put a shunt in. We're going to have to drill a hole. I'm like, oh gosh, I hope the bleeding stops soon. So day 2, they do another CAT scan. It's subsiding a little bit with the bleeding, but he says we're going to give her a little more time before we put the shunt in or whatever. Well, it had finally stopped bleeding, thank goodness. By the end of the second day, I just knew she was still 100% with us. I could tell she was still spiritually, mentally, everything, she was still there. And I just said to my family members, I said, listen, for me, I want to go in tomorrow and just talk to her one-on-one, just tell her what she meant to me. I just want to just share. And I said, whatever you guys want to do, it's all up to you, whatever. But I feel I need to do this. While I can tell she's still very coherent, she's very... So that's what we do the next day. We all started filtering one by one. And I mean, she stayed awake for all 8 of us. It was amazing. Like, she stayed awake. And yeah, so by the end of the 3rd day, the doctor came in and did another CAT scan. The bleeding had stopped and did another CAT scan. Thank goodness, no more bleeding. But he said, okay, nothing's changing. And I'm like, okay. So day 4 happens. It's so much just... Yeah, mentally you just don't know where you're at when all this is going on. By the 5th day, I remember him coming in. We were all there, and they did another CAT scan. The doctor came back in and said, okay, can you guys all come into this room? And he showed us the picture of her brain. And he said, okay, so I want you to focus on the left side of her brain over here. In 1976, she had a pretty bad stroke also, but it was where she recuperated from. He's like, look at this and tell me where you see a little black spot. Well, we all said, well, there's right there. And it was the size of my thumbnail. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. He's like, okay, now shift your eyes over to this side. And I'm like, I remember saying, I don't see anything. He's like, no, look closer. And I went, oh, it was this big. And I looked at him and I said, the whole thing is... There's nothing there. And he's like, and I said, oh my goodness. And I asked the doctor, I said, listen, are we reacting too quickly by removing this life support? And when he said this to me, he said, listen, if your mother wasn't on life support right now, she would have already passed. I went, okay. I said, take it off tomorrow at noon. Why I said that, I don't know. I just needed to process in my mind. I'm removing something that's keeping her here, but I promised her, a year back that I would do the right thing, and I thought, am I giving her enough time? But wait, and he just said, listen, there's just less than 1% chance she'll ever get up again. And I'm like, I can't do that to her. We've got to take this life support away. So that night was horrible. I know I hadn't slept for days, probably the first 4.5, 5 days. I just didn't sleep much. 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. When I told the doctor, now, we all collectively as a family decided to do it, but my brother came up to me, loved my brother to death, but he said, Tom, I will never be able to tell that doctor to take that life support away. So if it was up to me and I had to make a decision, she'd violate it for years. And I go, but Wes, that would be her biggest fear. And he's like, I know, but I can't do it. You have to be the spokesperson for the family. And I'm like, I'm fine with that. And multiple sisters and stuff would come up to me when I got there, and they'd grab me from behind and be like, oh, you're the rock of the family. Thank God you're here. We wouldn't know what to do without you. I thought, okay, wait, this is all of our decision. But it was kind of, and I'm not trying to make it sound bad, but it was kind of left on me to tell the doctor to take it away. So I told him, 12 o'clock, just do it tomorrow at noon. So when I told him that, I was like, whoa, what have I just done? How am I going to live with myself? And I thought, I just got to get out of the hospital for a minute. And so walked around, whatever. Well, the next day comes, and the morning flew by, of course. And they go in, and they take the life support away. And it took a little longer than normal because they were being very careful with her because, the tubes were, just anyway. So And I remember when they took the life support away, we all went in 2 by 2 just to kind of say things. And here's the part that was so, I don't want to say challenging. My mother was still looking at us. She couldn't talk to us. She couldn't do anything. And I'm thinking to myself, so my head was just in a space of, what have I done? But the strange thing is, when they took the life support away from her, I walked in, I think I went in with my sister Sharp. And I looked at my mother, and I'm like, she looks 20 years younger. What just happened just now? And I looked at her, I go, come here. So we walked outside of the hallway, and I said, Sharp, does Mom look 20? She goes, I thought the same thing. I go, what is happening right now? Why does, her wrinkles were tightening up. Everything was changing about her, and she was 79 and 11 months old. And I'm like, wow, okay. So anyway, we just, everybody went 2 by 2. We just, after I went in with the Shar, I said to everybody, listen, I have got to go to the hotel. I've got to go lay down. I am so exhausted. I can't even think straight. I'm so exhausted. So I remember leaving the hospital. She was on the 8th floor. We got down to the bottom floor. I remember walking outside. I remember spotting my sister Sandy, like walking on a sidewalk over to the left, and Barb and Tanya were over here, and I'm like, girls! And they heard me finally, and we all kind of ended up on the lawn between the hospital and the hotel. And we all kind of got together, and I just said, girls, I'm so exhausted. And they're like, yeah, we just need to go for a walk, because everyone was processing in their own head of what's going on. And so we all just talked for a few minutes, and I said, girls, I'm so exhausted, I just need to sit down for a second. I thought I sat gently onto the grass. Sandy said, oh, no, you plopped. And just kind of, and I don't remember doing that, but whatever. And I remember sitting there for a few minutes and finally saying, girls, can you just help me over to the hotel? I just got to go lay down. I have to go lay down. And so I got up. As soon as I took one step, Sandy was here, Barb and Tanya were here. As soon as I took one step, I grabbed for both of them because I literally, my legs gave out from underneath me. I thought I was just exhausted. And I'm like, girls, oh, geez, help me get across. By the time we got from here to, I don't know, the end of the room back there, we hit the street. And when we got to the street, literally, I couldn't move my legs anymore. My sisters were dragging me, still upright, and they're dragging me. My legs were out behind me. Cars were stopping like, what is going on here with this guy? They get me into the hotel. There's a guy behind the counter. Don't remember his name, but he's watching all this, and he's like, whoa. So I remember coming through the hotel, and I remember spotting a wheelchair right when we came in the door over to the left. And so I said we went up to the elevator. I said, girls, I'm fine. Just let go of me now. I feel like I'm fine. And so elevator door, I pushed it to open up. Elevator door opened, and I took a step, and I fell right on my face. Just boom. And I'm like, whoa. And I rolled myself over on my back, and I said, Barb, that's my oldest sister, I said, go by the front. I said, there's a wheelchair over there. I said, I can't get up. Go get that wheelchair. She's like, oh my gosh. So she runs and gets the wheelchair. I forced myself by pulling myself onto this wheelchair. And I remember asking my sisters, and I thought this was so odd. I said, girls, can you put my legs up on the foot pedals to get them off the ground? Two of my sisters could not lift one of my legs up. And they looked at me and said, Tommy, it's like your legs are cemented to the ground. We can't lift, and they started crying. We can't lift them up. I said, oh, come on, it's just like one leg. And they're like, and finally, they finally got my legs on the foot pedals. That's what I thought. Why is all this dead weight? What's going on with me? I thought, this is really odd. So I'm sitting there. A nurse came out of the hotel restaurant and said, is everything okay over here? And my sisters are like, we don't know what's going on. And so they took my pulse. It was really high. And they said, listen, you should probably go to the emergency room. I looked at them. I said, no. I'm fine. I will be fine. I just need to sit here for a few minutes. And they're like, yeah, but I don't care how exhausted you are. You shouldn't have collapsed like that. And I thought, no, I'm fine. So the nurse leaves. My sisters are still there. And I remember just sitting there, and all of a sudden the room started spinning. And I thought, uh-oh. And I'm getting a little worried, and all of a sudden I blacked out. And I came back to, and I looked at Barb, and I said, you need to call 911. I said, I'm losing consciousness, and I don't know what's happening. So she calls 911. Now we are, here to the end of that wall from the hospital. Well, they call the ambulance has to be called. Okay. And I'm thinking, oh Lord. So here comes the ambulance drivers, two big guys as big as me. They come into the gurney and they're asking me, do you know your name? I'm like, yeah, I know who I am, whatever. So they said, well, we really feel we need to take you to the emergency room. I said, I really don't. But they said, no, we need to take you. So one guy got behind me in the wheelchair, one guy got under my legs. They tried to lift me out. They couldn't budge me. And I jokingly looked back at them and I said, good thing I just lost 30 pounds because you guys are kind of struggling. And it took the cop, because the cop's always dispatched, the cop came in, it took 3 of them, plus my sister's holding the gurney, to finally get me up on this thing. I thought, why are they feeling this heavy? And I just thought, whatever. So, take me to the hospital. I'm like, oh, jeez, this is so ridiculous. So they bring me in there, and then they admit me into a room. The doctor says, listen, you need to stay overnight. I said, no, listen, if I can get up here in a few minutes, I'm going to walk out of here. And they're like, you really shouldn't do that. I said, well, you don't know me. I'm really strong-minded, and I'm going to do what I want to do. So, a few minutes later, about 15 minutes later, I felt the feeling come back, and I got up. And I walked out. I remember walking out of the room, and Barb and Sandy and Tanya were still waiting for me. And they were like, Tommy, what are you doing? And I said, I'm leaving. No, you're white as a ghost. You need to get back in that room. I go, no, I'm fine, you girls. Sandy, I said, I'm fine. Just help me across. So again, here we are. We're not very far from the hotel, right? So I walk outside very carefully. And when the cold Minnesota air hit me, because it was March, it was very cold back there, it was kind of a shock, and I fell against the brick wall, and I said, go get your car. And they're like, please, go back in the hospital. I'm like, no, I'm fine. So they get me over to the room, and I remember walking in the room, and I got to the room by myself. When we came in the second time, the guy behind the counter, and why I'm bringing him up, because of something that happened, and you'll hear this, and you'll be like, what? So he was gone for the night. So there was a new person behind the desk. When I came back in, after he saw me collapse in the elevator, then when I came back the second time, he was gone. I came in. I went up to the room. And I remember thinking, I just got to lay down. But before I laid down, I thought, I feel like I have to go to the bathroom. But I thought, no, I do got to lay down first. So I remember making my way over to the bed, and I laid down, and the minute I laid my body back down on this bed, I can't even explain to you how it felt. It was like I felt this tingling in my toes, and this tingling in my hands, and all of a sudden, I was completely paralyzed. I could not move. All I could do was move my head, and I'm like, what is happening to me right now? I don't understand this. And so now I'm getting a little more anxious, because I like to be in control, and I'm not in control of my body. Like, I'm thinking, I'm in the best physical shape I was ever in. I had lost a bunch of weight. I was in the best physical shape when I was 39 years old. And I'm thinking to myself, why can't I get up? Why can't I get my hands? My hands were across here. Why couldn't I get my hands moved just to here? I couldn't move. The longer it went on, the scarier it became. And I can't even explain this because I knew nothing about chakras at the time. At the height of, wow, I can't move. It was like, and it didn't hurt. It was like I felt something just open the top of my head up, and my mother's voice came so loud, not to yell at me, but she said, now, how do you like how that feels? I'm laying up here, totally paralyzed, can't move, messing myself, my mother was a very private woman, having to be changed by strangers, and you're carrying around guilt, what you promised me about removing this life support, don't you ever feel guilty again. And I went, ugh. And my sister Shar was there, and I said, Shar, and she goes, what just happened to you? I go, get everybody over here. Get all the siblings over here quickly. And I'm still paralyzed. Even though I heard this message, I can't move. I could not move. I'm just like, whoa, wow, thanks, Mom, wow, okay, got it. I will never, okay, I've got the message, 100%. So Shar calls everybody, they all come in. Now, only 3 really knew about it, Sandy, Barb, and Tanya. The other ones went, Tommy, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, well, So I tell them a little bit what's going on, and they said, wait, you were feeling guilty? What now? And so I had to explain to them, listen, I know we all made the decision collectively as a family to take the life support away. But because I told the doctor I've been carrying around this guilt, and I said, I felt like one day you would all just hate me, like you didn't give mother enough time, blah, blah, blah. I said, but we had all the proof in the world. And they said, no, we would have never done that. And I go, yeah, but how do I know that? I didn't know that. And I said, I want to explain something to you guys now. No matter what happens in my life, I will never, ever, ever feel guilty about taking that life support away because that's what she wanted. We had all the proof in the world. And they said, absolutely. When I voiced it very clearly to the siblings, because I thought for sure one day they're going to go, God, you just didn't, why did you act so quickly? I just knew that would probably happen. As soon as I told them, no matter what happens in my life, I will never feel guilty about it, ever in my whole life. As soon as I voiced those words, there was this tingling in my toes, starting in my hands, and it came and it settled in my middle, and all of a sudden I just felt this lift, and I'm like, wow, okay, I think I'm okay. And I kind of checked myself, I could move a little bit, and I got myself up, went to the bathroom, and thought, wow, okay, that's interesting. It's like, okay, I'm good. And I thought, yeah, we've done the right thing. We've done the right thing. And so with that, the next day comes, and I'm thinking, wow, okay, and that night I was exhausted, and I said, Shar, can you just stay with me tonight in this room? We had gotten 2 rooms adjacent to each other where we were all sharing the rooms. So she decides to stay in the room with me that night. And so I crash early, whatever, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, you know what, I just want to get up in the morning, I just want to go say goodbye to Mom. I thought I was going to be there till her last breath. I just thought I was going to be, but I thought, when that happened, I just said, you know what, I want to go back to the farm. I want to just go back, and there's 8 kids here and a niece, there's enough. And I said to her, I said, I just feel like I want to go home tomorrow, and I want to just go back to the farm. She's like, I'm kind of feeling the same way. I said, you know what, great. Sandy got wind of it and said, you know what, I really want to go too. And I said, well, with 5 more kids here and a niece, great. So that's what Shar and I and Sandy decided, that we're just going to get up the next day and we're going to go ahead and go home, because it sounds horrible, it was just going to be a matter of time, and she will be passing. So went to bed that night, going, okay, I'm going to get up the next morning and go see her. So woke up that morning feeling great. Like, okay, I got the message. We did what my mother she made me promise her. I'm good. I want to just go say goodbye to her and then get on the road. I remember looking over at the other bed and said, Shar, are you awake? And she's like, yeah, I've actually been awake for a while, but I didn't want to disturb you because you had really powerful night last night. So she's like, I just left you alone. I said, well, I'm going to get in the shower quick, and I said, I just want to quickly freshen up, I said, and then we're going to go over and say goodbye to Mom and go. And she's like, great. So got into whatever, got showered, whatever, and I said to her, I said, hey, I'm going to go next door, grab some muffins and some milk. Do you want some? She's like, yeah, give me some, whatever. So I go next door. She's like, I'm jumping in the shower. So Shar gets in the shower. I go to the other room. Donna was in there, her husband, whatever, and I said, hey, Donna, and she's like, are you okay today? I said, well, I'm good. I said, we're just going to get something to eat, whatever. So come out of that room, come back into the original room, sit down at a little round table, and it's always ironic how everything happens so powerfully at the corner of a room. It's like, okay, here we are again. And I'm eating and drinking, and I thought, that's weird. I don't really feel that great again, but I'm fine. I'm fine. So I'm still trying to eat, and I'm like, ugh, I just don't feel right. Shar looks around the corner, saying, hey, I'm out of the shower, I'm almost ready, are you okay? And I go, Shar, I don't know. I said, I feel kind of weird. And she's like, tell you what, I will check us out, I will load the bags, you just rest. That was big last night what happened to you. So I said, Shar, I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to lay down for a few minutes while you check us out, because I said, I don't know, I just don't feel right. So I remember getting up, I came around the side of the bed, I positioned myself exactly the same way as I did the night before. My legs were off of the bed, and I laid on it diagonally, and when I laid back my head onto the pillow, the same thing happened again. got paralyzed. It moved up very quickly. It moved into my arms. I had my arms at this time like this, and I'm like, oh, and I could hardly breathe. And I remember just saying out loud, Mom, I got the message yesterday. What's going on? And Char looked around the corner and she's like, Tommy, are you okay? And I go, Char, I don't get it. I said, I feel like I'm paralyzed again. I said, I can't move. I can't get up. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to go get Donna. So she ran next door, got Donna, my sister, and said, Donna, I'm going to go quickly go check out stuff. Something's going on with Tom. Go sit with him. So I'm sitting there, my hands are crossed, and I remember my sister Donna walks in, and I remember seeing this terrified look on her face, and I couldn't figure out why. But she looked at me and she goes, Tommy, can I call 911? And I go, no. Donna, just come and sit with me. And so I reached out and I grabbed her hand and I said to her, at this time, she's crying. And I'm like, why is she crying? I'm thinking to myself, I don't understand what's happening. I grabbed her hand and I held her hand. I said, whatever you do, don't leave me. And she then just burst into tears. The reason she was so freaked out when she came in the room, I did not know this. I did not feel this. She said from my waist up, I was coming off of the bed. Like, she said, it looked like you were levitating off the bed. She goes, it was so scary to see. And that's when she goes, can I call 911? I'm like, no, why? I had no idea my body was. I know what it was now. I want to call it, I wasn't levitating, I was starting to ascend. And when I grabbed her hand, she sat there, and I just said, whatever you do, don't leave me. By this time, Char comes back in. I know Donna looked over at Char and went, I don't know what's happening here. So Char runs over. She kneels down right next to my leg, and she just starts rubbing my leg. I could hear them talking to me, and like, Tommy, are you okay? I just said, girls, I just don't understand. And with this one hand over my chest, all of a sudden, I could hardly breathe. I was like, I was shortness of breath. I couldn't catch my breath. And then I asked my one sister, Char, I said, can you remove my hand off my chest? I can't breathe. And she picked up my hand and it just plopped alongside of my body and it got all curled up like this. That's how my mother's hand was in the room. And so I'm holding it, and all of a sudden I could hardly catch my breath. I got, like I always am in the dead of summer here, steaming hot. I felt like I was on fire. I was so hot. I remember reaching up and oops, whoops. I started literally fanning myself because I grabbed my shirt and I was so hot. Sandy walks in at this time and is like, whoa. She runs in and sees how hot I was. She went and got a little towel. She dabbed my lips, whatever. She was just like, she was kind of freaked out. I remember Donna's husband walked in and he looked and he walked right back out. Like, not doing this. And he walked right out. Well, then I'm laying there and all of a sudden when I was so hot, that's when I asked my sister, I said, call the hospital and see how Mom's doing. So Char calls the hospital, puts the ear to my phone because I couldn't hold it. And at that time, I was starting to lose my voice. And I just said, Barb is our oldest sister. I said, how's Mom? And she's like, well, just a few minutes ago, her oxygen dropped from 80 to 50, and she's having a really hard time breathing. And she broke out in such a sweat that literally her pillowcase had her head and her shoulders full of sweat, and they just changed her pillowcase. And I'm like, okay, well, how? And my voice got lower and lower. Finally, Char had to get the phone to Tanya, our niece, and finish the conversation. Well, when the phone got taken from my ear, all of a sudden I went, oh. I felt this just, oh, okay. At the same moment, they gave my mother a giant dose of morphine, and she was like, whew, and she laid her head off the left side of the pillow and relaxed. At that point, I shut my eyes as I felt so relaxed at that point. I shut my eyes, and I remember laying my head. I'm still holding on to my sister Donna's hand. I feel Char rubbing my legs, trying to get circulation going. And I was in this very, very relaxed state. I could hear my sisters talking. At one point, Donna said, well, let me back up. As I'm lying there, very relaxed, very coherent, everyone around me, I could hear them talking. And I can't even explain the distance, but it was probably here to the end of my kitchen. There came this really bright light. Did not hurt to look at it. And I was like, and I went, wow, tell your sisters what you're seeing. So I'm trying to force my eyes open, and I'm trying to force my mouth open to go, sisters, weird, there's this big bright light. And I could not open my eyes, I could not open my mouth. It did not scare me, but I thought, why can't I open my eyes? Why can't I talk to them? What? I hear them, what? And then all of a sudden, it went away. And I'm like, well, that was really, wow, that was very interesting. When that happened, I heard Donna say to Shar, look at his eyeballs under his lids. They're moving all around. And at that point, when I heard her say that, I'm like, and I was going to try to say to her, yes, there was this light. I wasn't allowed to talk. I wasn't allowed to open my eyes. And I'm like, I guess I'm just supposed to be like this. So I'm just relaxed. The next time the light came in, it came about to that cabinet. And at that point, I could not hear my sisters anymore. I could feel her a little bit. I had my sister Donna's hand, but I could not hear anything anymore. And this light showed up by this cabinet. I mean, now it is super bright. Did not hurt to look at it again, but it was like this vibration. It was like this vibration. At that point, my sister Karen comes running into the hotel room saying, Donna, and I didn't hear this, I was told this later, Donna, Tom needs this. And she's like, what is that? She ran in the room and she brought my mother's handprint. And Donna goes, Karen, what is that? She goes, this morning, Nurse Lori asked our oldest sister, would you like a handprint of your mom? And she's like, that's really nice. Yes, we would love. So they made 9 handprints. When Barb kind of heard that I was going through something said to her, grab one of those handprints and just get this to Tom for some reason. Why would that happen? Who knows? So Karen runs in. I didn't know she had this. She says to Donna, Donna, this is Mom's handprint. Tom needs it. And Donna said she let go of my hand at that point. And I did not hear her say this, but first Donna just took that handprint, held it against her chest, and then said, Tom, this is Mom's handprint. She laid the handprint on my chest and took my hand and laid it right on top of my mother's handprint. When she put my hand on top of that piece of paper, which I didn't feel, as clear as you all are sitting right there, I had my mother by her hands. She's right in front of me, and I'm like, okay, and I'm trying to open my eyes again, and when I had her by her hands, I watched this, all I can explain it was like this energy, and it circled through us 3 times. And you could see it vibrating through her, and then vibrating up through me and down, and I'm like, what is happening? And the 3rd time it circled us, it was right here, right behind her. This light encompassed us all the way around us, and I went, oh, I think I know what this means. I let go over here. She didn't walk, she kind of drifted right here alongside, and I cannot explain this clear enough. It didn't hurt or anything. The force that her and I went through that light was a whoosh, and all of a sudden, we're through this light, and I went, ugh. There was my dad, who died in 1978, standing on the left side of this staircase. All I saw was gray and white. It was just a gray and white open. And I'm like, wow. And he was from here to into that couch. And I'm like, and then there was a staircase, and then on the other side was my mother's parents. And I'm like, wow, okay. I'm on the other side where we end up after we leave the physical world. Okay, I get this. as I'm seeing my dad, my grandparents, and I'm feeling what we feel, and I'm like, wow, I don't want to go back. I want to stay. When I said that in my head, I know it was the voice of God said, no, it's not your time. You have to go back and share this. And I went, what? What do you mean, share this? You have to. A lot of people fear death. They fear the unknown. They fear, is there a heaven? Is there a real God? I just gave you an experience and showed you, and I'm like, okay, but I really don't want to go back. I want to stay here. And he's like, you have to go back. And when he said that a second time, I went, and this is all I can explain. I just gently took my mom like that and just watched her. She didn't walk. She glided over to my dad. There was no hug. There was this vibrational greet. Then she wandered over to her parents. Same thing. Then I thought, this is interesting. And then she went and she started ascending up the staircase. And I thought, what is she doing? And I remember watching her. And when she got to the top of the staircase, she turned around and I went, ugh. She was this 24-year-old woman that I remember in our farmhouse in North Dakota. There was this photo, and I have it out there in my spiritual room, my podcast room that's coming up. That picture would hang in our living room, and I'd always say to her, Mom, look at you. You are so beautiful. She's like, oh, stop being so silly, Tommy. No, you're beautiful. She's like, that's when I was 24 years old, didn't have any kids yet, and she goes, I felt so amazing. When I released her and she turned around, she was that 24-year-old woman again. And I went, when she turned around, that's when I could force my eyes open and my mouth, and all I could say was, there was this light. She's so beautiful. There was this light. And I heard my sister Donna say, did you see Dad? Why she said that? I went, Dad, I saw Dad. I saw Grandma and Grandpa. And all I could say was, there was this light. She's so beautiful. And just went on for 5-10 minutes. As I'm laying there, I'm thinking to myself, what just happened to me? Not trying to, because there are many things that I was 39 at the time. From the first time I had an experience, I was 10. I had many from 10 to 39. I believe, this is for me, that's for my own belief, I believe I was tested all through my life. Because at about 30, I turned back to God. At 13, I was not interested anymore. At 30, I found my way back. He kept testing me all through my life. I think knowing he was going to give, all I can say is he gifted me with this most profound experience. Why me? I don't know. All I know is I have to share this with people because I was so afraid of death at 13. I feared it for years, and now I can honestly say I cannot wait. I'm not a depressed person. I'm I am so grateful for my life. I'm grateful for, I call this God's ranch. This is not my ranch. I'm just the caretaker of this place. I am so grateful for what I have and everything. I thought it was kind of all going to be done. And I thought, wow, okay, that was a profound experience. That's amazing. And when I heard that I had to I actually heard you need to tell this. I thought, and I heard write a book. I went, how am I going to write a book about taking my mother off life support and dying? And how is this going to help people? How is this going to be positive? I thought, I got to go back to Minnesota. And I got to get affidavits from doctors, nurses, everyone who's been around, just because I had to just compile information. So I called my sister Donna. I said, Donna, this was 6 months after I crossed my mother over. So I said, Donna, I got to come back to Minnesota. And I got to go ahead and get some affidavits. So, I hate getting on a plane and sitting between two people because I'm such a big guy. And of course, where do I end up? In between two people. So, I've got my little music on. I'm like just trying to not focus. There's people right here. And all of a sudden, this is what happens. All of a sudden, and all I can call it is like it's a movie screen. Now, I'm looking around the plane or whatever. This movie screen comes in front of me. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, wow, that is some beautiful scenery. I've never seen anything like this before. Then I looked at the right-hand side of this movie screen, and there's two kids playing. And I went, and I said in my head, who are those kids? And finally I kept looking, I went, Kelly, is that you? Now I didn't say it out loud, because I'm sure this people would have ran. But in my head I went, Kelly, is that you? When I said that, he turned around and looked at me and I went, oh, whoa. Why am I seeing now the scenery? Because the first time I crossed over, I only saw black or gray and white. Why am I seeing the scenery today? And I thought, this is odd. So then I said, Megan, is that you? And then I had never met Megan because I was in California. She passed away at 5 years old or 7, or I can't remember how old she was. I never met her. And she turned around, before I said, Megan, is that you? I said, who's the little girl with you, Kelly? And I kept asking him, and he wouldn't answer me. Finally, my mother shows up on the left side of this movie screen, and she's like, Tommy, and I wasn't surprised to see her. I said, oh, hey, Mom. And so she says, you know who that is? I go, well, it'd be easier if you just told me. She goes, yes, I know it would be easier, but look closer. And I went, Megan, is that you? And Megan turns around, and I went, wow, okay. Why am I seeing the scenery 6 months after I crossed her over? And I thought, okay, whatever. We land. Donna, I pick up my sister. We get in the car. I tell her what happened. She goes, wait. Today on the plane, you saw. I go, yes, Donna, very clearly. I said, I know what the scenery looks like now, and now I really can't wait to get there. And she's like, why do you think this happened? I go, I don't know. So we get to Rochester, Minnesota. We get to the hotel. We walk in the hotel, and I'm like, that looks like that guy that was here that night when I fell in the elevator, but whatever, he won't remember us. So we walked up to the counter, and I said, hey, by any chance would room 135 be open? He's like, yeah, it actually is. I said, okay, cool. So he gave us the key. We went. I went down. I know I want to stay in the same room that I crossed mom over in. I want to be 133. So we went back to the counter. Now you guys can all try to figure out what this meant because it blew my mind. I walk up to the counter and I go, oh, I'm sorry. I go, you're going to think we're a little odd. I said, but can we have the room right next door? Because, we were here 6 months ago. Before I could say anymore, he goes, oh, no, I remember you. And I go, you do? He goes, oh, yeah. I thought you died that night when you hit and you were taken out by the ambulance. I said, oh, you did? He goes, yeah. I go, oh, well, no, I'm here. And I said, my sister and I just came back. I said, I just kind of wanted to talk to people who kind of witnessed that night. Guess what this man who I had never talked to before said to me? He looks right at me and he says, I have a question for you. Did you take your mother to the other side? And I went, what? He goes, did you cross over with your mother? And I went, yes, Bob, but you don't know me, so how would you know that? He said to me, and my sister she had to grab the camera. He said, oh no, son, I've known you for a long, long time. And I went, oh, I don't know Bob. I don't know what he is. I've never met him in my life. But he tells me now, was he an angel on earth testing me to see if I was going to be brave enough to go, yeah, I did. I crossed my mother over and I'm not ashamed to tell anybody about it. And I said, Bob, that's really, really intense that you said that because you just don't know me. He's like, I will write down everything I remember from that night. But I have one huge favor to ask you. And I go, what is that? He goes, my wife is very, very, very ill. He goes, if you could see our backyard in Minnesota, it is a paradise. It's like, it is beautiful. Even with the snow that comes in the winter. And he said, she's not afraid of dying. All she talks about daily is what the scenery is going to look like. And I went, I'm not in control of my life. I see that now. I'm just a vessel that things just could come through. And I went, Bob, now, if you would have asked me that yesterday before I got on the plane, I'd say gray and white with a staircase. That's it. That's all I got for you. Not going to lie to anybody about anything. Gray and white staircase. And he's like, but I said, Bob, here's what happened today on the plane. And he goes, the way he looked at me and smiled at me, it's like he knew I can't explain it. It's like, I don't know who he was, but it's like, he's like, yep. He goes, okay, so here's what I'll sign I'll write everything down. but I want you to come to lunch with my wife and I want you to just talk to her and tell her about what you've seen. I said, absolutely. So the next day we go to lunch. I think her name was Elaine, and I tell her the whole story at the end of it. And I said to her, Elaine, I promise you, I will put my hand on any religious artifact, whatever it is, and I promise you, I know exactly what you're going to see. Exactly what you're going to see. And I will stake my life on it that I'm not making this up. And she got up, and she grabbed me, and she said, I just cannot thank you enough for sharing this story. And I went, oh boy, my life is not going to be what I thought it was going to be the next 20 years of my life. I left that hotel and I just thought, wow, how am I going to live like I used to live now knowing what I know? I wrestled with it for a long time, but you know what? It's taken 21 and a half years, and I don't know why. No, I do know why, because I wasn't ready. And I tried to force it before, and things weren't happening right, and whatever. This is all God's timing. This has nothing to do with me. He is taking a hold of this message through me. I'm just a messenger. I'm nobody special. That I know. I'm just a guy who loves horses, who loves his ranch, who loves people, who of course has challenges with people like everyone else, but I just am the messenger for something that's like, God is real, heaven is for real, and it is the most amazing place you could ever imagine. And I have a real hard time at this point in my life when someone passes away. I feel sorry for the people they leave behind, but I'm so happy for them because most of the time they're ready to go like my mother was ready to go. So it's been just a real challenge that way, but I cannot explain to you. I am just so grateful for this message, and from here forward, all I'm going to be doing is just sharing this over and over and over and over. That's my story. That's the experience. And here's something I want everyone to know. That's not for me. That's for God's message. I'm just the person delivering it. That to me, sorry. Because this isn't about me. This is about His ability to bring me back from where I was to where I left Him, and then I got myself back. Yeah. And I have never been at such inner peace. For the last 4 months, in fact, 2 months, and I want to keep going, but 2 months ago, I was back at a family reunion, and something profound happened, and I felt this old side of Tom shut off, and I couldn't understand what was happening, but I could literally feel an old side of me leave. It was because for 2 months prior, I had been praying so hard. I just said, God, I am so ready. I am so ready. Here I am. Use me for this message when you feel fit. I can't stop what's going on right now. There's stuff happening in New York. It's going to be on a New York billboard. I'm just like, what's happening? I don't have control of it. It's His timing. So I'm just now going for the ride to share His message. So I'll stop rambling. But thank you guys for coming. And that's what happened.
Get off the camera.
That was great.
Very good. Good job. Thanks, Mom.
So
I saw the mic flash after you dropped it. I'm just curious.
That's okay. I'm sure it'll be fine.